Yo, what's up? I'm glasseyed or Morgan, whatever you prefer. I haven't done a video in a little while, and I just released an EP of 6 tracks called Death Wish. So I figured I'd take today to go through one of the tracks on that EP and break down some of the production stuff that's going on. If you have listened to the EP already, I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for listening. And if you haven't, you should check it out. If you like any of that kind of new metal mixed with metalcore, modern shoegazy stuff, there might be something in there for you. You might like it. But this track is called I Deserve It. It's got a big old school 2000s new metal vibe to it. It sounds like this. You can hear kind of a Linkin Parky vibe going on, and there's some riffs and breakdowns in there too. So we'll get started. I'll just jump straight into it. From the beginning of the track, this is how it starts. So you can hear that kind of synthy stuff going on at the start. I am going to come back to the synths later on in the video because there's a little bit going on in that patch and it becomes kind of more relevant later on in the track. But for the moment, we'll go through this main riff that you're hearing here. First off the bat, drum-wise, I'm using here basically the same drum setup, drum chain that I use for all of my tracks. The basis of that is Get Good Drums Invasion. It's absolutely incredible. It's close to stock here, but I've changed some of the cymbals, and depending on the track, I'll play with the different snares, the different kicks and stuff in here. So it's GGD Invasion is the basis of the drum sound, and then on top of that, I'll layer my own third-party kick and snare samples, which I'll solo here for you really quickly. So you can hear that's like a real clicky kick happening on top that just gives it a little bit of presence, and then that like classic modern metalcore like gunshot snare to make that snare sound kind of huge. I've had these samples, these one-shot samples on my hard drive for so long. So I can't remember where I got them, unfortunately, but they're really easy to find. There's loads of them out there. There's a 101 like kind of multi-sampled metal one-shots out there. So if you have a little look, you can definitely find them. But yeah, so what I do is I route everything from Contact here out of Contact and into individual tracks within Ableton. This allows me to basically have a little bit more control over everything. If you look here, if I solo this kick track, I can process the kick that's coming out of Get Good Drums on its own. I can change the level, compress it, distort it, whatever. I can do the same with the kick sample, and I can blend the two to taste. It's really handy, you know. Same goes there for the toms, cymbals, overheads. So yeah, it just gives you a huge amount of control over your drums. It's really helpful. The only other kind of interesting thing that's going on with the drums here is this kind of one-shot metallic sample that's happening on the snare hits. If I solo it here. Really simple, but just gives it that kind of industrial feel, especially when it's the exact same one shot repeating every hit. You get this really like repetitive, industrial feel that lends itself to this kind of like Static X kind of vibe that's going on here. That is pretty much it for the drums. The processing doesn't really change at all throughout the rest of the track. If you would like me to do a more in-depth video on the processing chain that's going on with the drums there, let me know in the comments, and I will definitely make one for you. So the riff continues on here, and halfway through we get these electronic percussion elements coming through. Really easy way to add some drive and motion to a main riff like this. It's literally just basic trap hats playing 16ths and then an offbeat open hat that's kind of coming from some sort of old school drum machine. Really easy. just makes the song feel like it's kind of moving forward. And again, this track has that kind of industrial feel, as I said, so the electronic samples work really, really well for this one. But yeah, that's basically it for the drums for the moment. We'll stick with the intro here and I'll move into the bass. Sometimes I will record live bass, but the bass guitar that I have is not very good. It's a bit of a starter bass. So I have taken to using Gin Bass 2, which is an absolutely amazing plugin. I think it's based on a Dingwall bass, I believe. So it's really got that like bitey, clanky, modern metal tone, which is really, really, it can really change the game for your overall guitar tone. I have found when you have the right bass tone underneath your guitars, it's like that's the secret to the guitar tone, I have found, in my experience anyway. So yeah, I'll basically run Gin Bass 2 through this Neural DSP Dark Glass plugin, and that gives me this like real aggressive kind of mid-range heavy almost bass tone. Yeah, that you can hear there. Something else I will also do is I split my bass into these two different channels here, so I'm effectively parallel processing it. What I've done here is set up two separate channels, one for low frequencies. You can see this low pass filter here, and then this one has the opposite, has a high pass filter on it. Again, it's just about control over the frequencies that are present in the bass. This allows me to like manage the sub versus the upper distorted frequencies of the bass guitar, which I find really, really helpful. Then at the end of the bass chain here, there's just some limiting going on. I find bass as an instrument generally responds pretty well to like pretty heavy compression. It can really help like tame it, keep it under control. Again, much like the drums, the bass pretty much stays the same for the whole track. There's not really any difference in processing that happens at all. So moving on to the guitars, what we have here is, for this main riff, it's double tracked, of course, and it's running through Fortin Nameless, Neural DSP's Fortin Nameless for the tone. I'll usually bounce between Neural DSP Gojira and Nameless. Sometimes I'll use Rabia as well, especially for like lead stuff. But for distorted rhythm stuff, I find Nameless and Gojira just unbeatable. To be honest, the tone, like usual for me, is quite close to just stock. I may have dropped the gain a little bit. I'm not 100% certain, but almost all of my guitar tones are pretty close to the stock tones on the VST plugin that I'm using. I'm not the biggest guitar tone nerd when it comes to my own music. I'm usually pretty happy when there's just distortion happening and it's tuned pretty low. So that is the most of what's going on with the rhythm guitars there. There's one other interesting thing that I will show you. This is jumping ahead a little bit, but if we go to the guitar group here, this is all of the rhythm guitar stuff is running through this group, and on this group there's a equalizer, a dynamic equalizer. This EQ is sidechained to the chorus vocals, which means that the EQ will duck certain frequencies that I've picked every time the chorus vocals hit. This is a trick that I use all the time. Distorted guitars they can be a bit of a villain for taking up huge amounts of the frequency spectrum. So this allows you to control the volume of some of those frequencies in order to create space for other instruments, and in particular vocals. So if I play you the chorus here, and if I open this EQ, you can see it dropping down there as the vocals hit. So really, really handy trick, and TD Nova is completely free. There are, of course, other EQs that can do this, like I'm pretty sure the Fab Filter stuff can do this, but TD Nova is completely free and it's absolutely sick. It's such a good plugin. It's such a steal. And if it's not in your arsenal, it definitely should be. Going back to the main riff here, there's a little lead line happening here as well. You can see the group that it's in is called Korn, because it's completely based on like those old school Korn super chorusy lead lines. Unfortunately, this lead line in particular was taken from an older Ableton project that I had, because I've had the idea for this song floating around for so long. So I don't actually have the original DI, so I don't know what amp modeler I use and stuff, but it's a really simple tone to get. It's just any sort of decently high gain amp with really, really, really heavy chorus. You can turn the rate, the depth, and the mix up further than you should, and you'll start getting that Korn vibe. So that's enough of the guitars for the moment. We'll come back to them later, but we move from this main riff into the verse. So the first thing to notice about this verse is there's a sort of call and response thing going on between the two guitars, which sounds like this. Two much cleaner tones going on. This initial clean tone here is totally clean, and this is pretty rare for me. I'm not using a neural DSP modeler. This is Guitar Rig. It's just a AC box, which I believe is their version of like a Vox AC 30 amp. So it's just ultra clean, going through some tape echo and some reverb, and that is bouncing back and forth and playing off this other tone. This is neural DSP. This is Gojira, and yeah, again, you can see there's just a lot of chorus happening there, very spacey, going through a lot of reverb. So that kind of forms the backbone of the verse. On top of that, we can have a look at the vocals here quickly as well, because there's quite a lot of layering going on in this verse in particular. We have like our main vocals here. So we've got triple tracked, center, left, and right. Then layered underneath them, we have this kind of whisper. Really, really heavily compressed and just layered on top of those vocals to give a kind of eerie, spooky vibe. There's also a vocoder layer. So if I solo the main vocal here. For all of the times I told myself. You can hear there's a vocoder layer happening there. That's coming from this wavetable sound down here. Very, very, very simple. It's just like two saw waves ever so slightly detuned. Adds a cool element to it. I would very, very, very rarely use a vocoder in one of my tracks. So this was good. This was good fun for me. It was good crack, you know? So that is most of the verse, but there is one other cool thing happening here in the percussion. So halfway through the verse, we bring in these trap hats and this 808 sound. Really, really simple. The 808 pattern is easy. You just pick any 808, basically. I have no idea what I used. This one, I just have a million packs of a million 808s. And then in the hats here, there's something cool going on, which is I've used the zone function in Ableton's sampler here, which allowed me to bring in, I basically dragged in 4 different hi-hat sounds. I panned them slightly differently and then use this MIDI randomize tool to basically completely randomize which hat is picked every time a MIDI note hits. So then I've just got one single MIDI note going here, you can see, but every time it hits, it picks a different hat. If you want a more in-depth tutorial on how I did that, I can totally do that for you as well. But there's a lot of them out there on YouTube. But yeah, it's good fun. Like it's a fun way of adding some kind of spice to the track, I guess. Moving on from the verse, we get finally to the chorus. The chorus is relatively simple in terms of what's going on. It's basically just drums, bass, the guitars that we already talked about, and then a lot of vocals. So I'll break down the vocals a little bit here. Essentially, they are triple tracked again. So we've got one in the center, one on the left, one on the right. And they are singing the main melody, which is here. Forsaken. On top of that, we've got some harmonies as well. And those harmonies just accent those big long notes. If we look at the harmonies really quickly, there is this kind of main one that's panned, again, triple tracked, center, left, and right. Then we have a lower one down here. And then a pretty dodgy falsetto one that works in the mix but does not sound great on its own. Just warning you now. And then on top of those harmonies, there's also this pitched scream thing going on, which sounds like this. I'd actually forgotten that that was in there, so interesting, cool. Aside from that, the only other major thing going on in this chorus is this really simple synth. Easy as hell, one note. Root note, the hot one, my favorite trick in the whole world, the hot one. Again, I'll have a quick look at the synths a bit later on when we get to the bridge. So from the chorus then, we move back into the main riff, and from the main riff, we go into a second verse. So the second verse is quite different to the first one. There's more of a hip-hop, nu metal rapping thing going on. It sounds like this. So the guitars are doing basically the same thing. We've still got those clean tones and that call and response going on, but the drums are playing a more defined groove, which kind of backs up those rapping vocals. The trap hats are still in, and the 808 returns in the second half of this verse. But aside from that, there's nothing hugely exciting going on. We move from that second verse into another chorus, which is almost identical, but there is a lead line, a guitar lead line that comes in here, which sounds like this. Another really, really easy trick. It's just basically playing a counter melody on top of the main chorus chords in octaves. Yeah, great way of adding a little bit of extra harmonic excitement on top of something that you've already heard. Moving on then from the second chorus, we kind of get into this slightly more interesting part, which is the build-up. So it sounds like this. So drums, bass, and guitars are chugging along much like they have been for the rest of the song, but I'm going to take this section to talk more in depth about the synths that are happening here. So you can hear underneath this build-up section, there's this really noisy, chaotic synth sound going on. So I'm going to solo it for you here. And what I'm using for this is an emulation of an old Oberheim OBX synth by G-Force. It's an absolutely incredible plugin. The interface is amazing and the sound is incredible. I think this synth is most often, at least in my mind, I think it's most often associated with a softer, like 80s paddy kind of sound. So it was really fun for me to try and take that and bastardize it a little bit. What I've done is I've taken a preset that was here. The preset's called Dark Winds. I have mapped a bunch of different, you can see down here in Ableton, I've mapped a bunch of different parameters to my MIDI controller, which you can't see. Oh, you can just see the end of it here. Yeah, there's like knobs up here at the top of this controller, and I've mapped these parameters to those knobs. So yeah, I've mapped LFO rate, filter frequency, the pitches of the two oscillators, and then the filter resonance, which is very important. Map them all to different knobs, and what that allows me to do is input just one note into the MIDI here, play that note, and as the buildup is going, I can just manually change all of those parameters and just twist them in random ways, basically mashes up the sound and gets me that kind of screaming, warping, twisting vibe that's happening. Really, really, really fun to do. You're just kind of twisting stuff at random, which is always good crack. But it also sounds amazing, and I knew I wanted something kind of nuts and chaotic going on in the background of this build-up, and this was the perfect way to achieve that. So it's basically the synth itself, the preset from the VST is running through Sound Toys Decapitator, which is adding quite a bit of distortion. It's heavily compressed again, and then the whole track itself is also being parallel compressed through the exact same parallel compression chain that is also affecting the drums. So the result is this like really squashed, compressed, distorted, nuts synth sound. This exact same synth sound is also used in the intro. That was the first thing you heard. You can also hear that it's running through a lot of delay and reverb just to put it in space. The other synth I'll talk about right now is this synth that I'm using in the choruses for just the root note. It's kind of a crazy synth. It's a random one that I found online. It is called Xenia. It's an emulation of a synth from the 80s or 90s called a Waldorf Microwave 2, I think. I could be wrong on the number of that, but it's Waldorf Microwave anyway. As far as I'm aware, that synth was used by quite a few like industrial acts, like kind of KMFDM and stuff. And you can see the interface is kind of, it's kind of crazy looking, but you can find loads of free patches for that synth online, and this VST allows you to just like use all of them, and you can affect them. It's got all the parameters here. So I literally just went through, picked a load of random ones until I found something cool, which is always a fun way of songwriting, I think. That synth is also being used in the main riff section, which I haven't looked at yet. So I'll solo this. You can hear this kind of like, it's almost like futuristic, like Matrix style drone pad. The same Xenia synth. Again, I just ran through a load of patches until I found something cool, found something that I liked. I have it panned here, so it's kind of swooping to the left and right. Gives this kind of like swirling around your head effect. Really, really fun. And all of those synth sounds really add to the kind of electronic industrial vibe that this track has. And the fact that this track was kind of harkening back to like 90s industrial stuff a little bit was the reason I wanted to use emulations of old school synthesizers rather than what I would usually reach for, which is like a Serum or Massive or something like that. So after that build up, we're nearly at the end of the track. We're kind of into the last few sections here, the last few things to talk about. This breakdown runs, or this build up runs into a breakdown that sounds like this. So pretty basic breakdown. The basic ones are always the best in my opinion. Shoot me. The only real thing of note that's happening here production-wise is in these guitar tones, there's an octave pedal turning on. So as soon as we move from this build-up section here, you can see this pitch-proof VST down here turning on. This VST is actually free, and it's basically just a harmonizer and a pitch shifter. It's totally free. It's absolutely amazing. I use it all the time. There is now pitch shifting stuff in the Neural DSP plugins, but I have had this plugin for years, since before I had a amp modeler with a decent octave effect. So that turns on in the breakdown, which basically if I solo the guitars here, you'll hear the thickness and body that it adds. So yeah, it adds that kind of lower chunk underneath the main riff, and it helps towards giving this feeling of the guitars being kind of lower tuned than they are almost, or something like that. Aside from that, in that particular breakdown, the bass and drums are chugging along as they usually do. There's some atmospheric effect stuff going on at the top here. There's this little scream sample. It's very, very low in the mix, but if I play the breakdown with and without it, you will kind of hear the high end difference that it makes. So this is without. Turning it on. Subtle, but you can hear that sort of energy being added to the upper register. After this breakdown, we go straight into a final chorus. This chorus is a double chorus and is effectively the same as the other choruses. Something that does happen here, you can see with this Hot One synth that I'm using. The first half of this double chorus, it's on the same octave that it has been for the entire song. And then moving into the final chorus, it goes up the octave, which is another really, really simple way of just adding a bit of energy, giving the song a final push at the very end. So I'll play it and you'll hear the difference that makes moving from chorus into chorus. It's a very, very Linkin Park move, I think. Relatively subtle, but also very, very, very effective. The final chorus contains one melodic variation in the vocal line as well, which I'll look at quickly here. I solo the vocals, you'll hear this kind of ad-lib going on in the background. So that melody is not in any of the other choruses, and that is something that I'm a big fan of, is kind of just treating that final chorus with a bit more importance or something than the previous ones, and kind of giving the listener an extra little bit of ear candy in that final chorus just to differentiate it from all the other choruses that they've already heard in the track. So that's pretty much it for this track. I hope you enjoyed the video. If I have skipped anything or like moved too fast through any particular thing that you were interested in, if you want me to go more in depth on anything, just let me know in the comments. I can make another video or I can respond to your comments, whatever. I'll answer any questions that you have. So yeah, that's it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, listen to the EP if you haven't already and you liked what you heard here. Yeah, have a good day or night whenever you're watching this.